5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Great market overview for us. You talked about all the corporate buying that was already happening in Virginia. And I love everything you're saying about kind of the way that the market is kind of blossoming and maturing, even in Dominion's RFP, carving in collaboration. We're thinking about equity right from the start this time. We've had a lot of land booms in this country over the last 400 or 500 years, and they weren't always equitable. And that's a unique opportunity this time. We can dig in and do this right. So here we are at 8:15. I'd like to turn right to our policy panel. We've got just stars upon stars upon stars in our stellar solar program here. If I can get as much alliteration as I can to try to do them justice, because the folks in this next block are really making a difference, each in their own way. And it's really great to see them come together. So let me just introduce everybody before I turn it over to them kind of for introductions. I'll begin with kind of the man in the hour of Virginia. He's the lead sponsor of that bill that I mentioned, HB 1925, which sailed through the House unopposed. It's on the governor's desk. Delegate Terry Kilgore joining us from the Virginia House of Delegates, actually, I think on his car. He's a very busy man. But we've also got Delegate Evan Hansen from the West Virginia House of Delegates. He presented in 2019. He was actually sick. He didn't have corona at the time, but he fought through that. And he's really been leading the charge on brownfield and brightfield redevelopment work for many years. We're happy to have him. We've got John Hillis there from SolUnesco. He is a solar developer doing a lot of work, but he's also very active in the policy space. And I think a lot of people, certainly the solar folks in Virginia know John very, very well, as well as Rachel Smucker. She is formal. It was something else, but now it's Chessa. They're kind of rebranding there.
MDVSEIA, the local SEIA affiliate.
Yeah, SEIA, but yeah, thank you. They're rebranding. Much like a lot of folks, the whole space. And then Chelsea Barnes from Appalachian Voices, she also was plugged in. Appalachian Voices was plugged in the last event, and they're doing tremendous work for Appalachia, and not just Brightfields, but beyond. If you're not plugged into the work that they're doing, and Chessa as well, both of these organizations are tremendous catalysts in the policy realm, but also, it translates down to the project level. So having said that, and bumbling over my words because I get really excited about this stuff, let me ask Mr. Kilgore, tell us all about your bill and the work that you're doing.
It's great to be with you all. Can you hear me? I'm okay. Okay.
You sound good.
Trying to do this from my car. I apologize, but it was great to have such a good group supporting House Bill 1925 dealing with brownfields, and we really made a pitch to our legislature that if we could put solar on brownfields, abandoned mine sites, it would be a great move for Virginia, because we would not use up our farmlands. Farming is still very important in Virginia. It's probably our best economic driver, but by using some of these brownfields and abandoned mine sites, it would be an opportunity. In Southwest Virginia alone, we have over 71,000 acres of abandoned mine sites that are available, could be available for solar projects. So we thought it was a win-win situation for us, and working with a vast group of stakeholders, Appalachian Voices, all the way up to to Dominion and others, to get something through the General Assembly. And it was a bipartisan move. Everyone should be for this. It takes away the opposition from individuals who don't want it in their not in my backyard type opposition. So we're really excited. We're really excited about moving forward, getting some funding, working with our federal partners at EPA or Department of Energy to get some funding for this opportunity.
Thank you. That's awesome. It really is the perfect kind of marriage and the perfect time. And again, everybody knows that this kind of stuff works. There is this kind of public role. These stranded sites, we have these legacy sites with these risk issues, and to get new capital to approach them, we have to be able to bag the risk. And we got a lot of great sessions. Just looking ahead in the program, on day 3, we've got a session on legal. We've got some great lawyers and insurance folks, and they've been wrapping this stuff up for a long time. And no one knows that better than Mr. Evan Hansen, our delegate from West Virginia, who's really been a brownfielder like myself. Evan, can you tell us kind of about the work that you do and been doing, and how you kind of came around to get passionate about Brightfields in particular?
Sure. I'm an environmental consultant. I've been doing this work for decades now, and just got elected to the House of Delegates a few years ago. So this is my 3rd legislative session right now. And one of the reports that my company, Downstream Strategies, put out a few years ago looked across the state of West Virginia to identify roughly how much land was available for solar development on former coal mines and other brownfield sites. And we found that there was about 200 square miles that deserved a closer look. And that's a lot, considering that in West Virginia, we have so little solar developed. According to SEIA, we only have 11 megawatts of solar in the entire state of West Virginia, and no large-scale projects. There is a 2.6 megawatt solar array that Toyota is building for their facility right now, so that'll make a difference. But there's a lot of degraded land in West Virginia. Former coal mines, surface mines, mountaintop removal sites that's been flattened, other types of brownfields. The mountaintop removal sites are largely in the southern part of the state, bordering on Southwest Virginia, but they're also in my part of the state in northern West Virginia. And then other brownfields are along the Ohio River in that industrial corridor and other industrial sites. So there's a lot of opportunity, and I don't know if this is the right time or if a later time will be more appropriate, but we took some steps last session to facilitate solar development on these sites, and we're already seeing the fruits of that in terms of projects and jobs. Do you want me to talk about that now, or you want me to wait?
Yeah, let's let me go around the horn before we open it back up, and I'll pick on Mr. Hillis, John Hillis from SolUnesco, who's been doing a lot of this work and is not afraid of brownfields either. So John, please introduce us to you and the work that you're doing.
Sure, and I'll address that brownfield comment in a second. Not afraid of them, but still trying to figure that one out. So I'm president and co-founder of SolUnesco. We're a utility scale developer operating primarily in Virginia. Currently, I sit on the Virginia Solar Energy and Energy Storage Development Authority, board chair of SHINE, which is the utility scale solar's workforce development initiative in Virginia. And previously, I was on board of MDVSEIA, now Chessa, and I chaired the Virginia committee back in the mid-teens, 2014, 2015, back when most of our asks were along the behind the meter DG net metering side. So very different back then, and it was only, what, 6-7 years ago. So that's my background. I'm still involved with the policy in Virginia regarding utility scale solar. But I know Rachel Smucker is here, and I'm glad to see her here, because if I misspeak, I'm certain she'll correct me. So.
Thank you. That's actually a perfect segue to Rachel, who I can see. There she is. Yeah, Rachel. And I couldn't find it before. It was it's now the Chesapeake Solar and Storage Association, a very apropos rebranding that I couldn't get to, but I love it very much. Please tell us about yourself and all the exciting things that are happening at Chessa.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. Rachel Smucker here. I serve as the Virginia Policy and Development Manager for Chessa. We're the Regional Solar and Storage Trade Association. As John said, SolUnesco is a member of ours. We represent solar companies across the DMV region and really try to push for strong and progressive solar policies at the state and also the local level. So happy to be here. And I also just want to say, I think it's absolutely incredible that we have an entire conference dedicated to exploring renewable energy deployment on previous coal sites and brownfield sites. That just goes to show how far we have come, not only as a Commonwealth, but I think as a nation, and all the good things to come. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And last and certainly not least, Ms. Chelsea Barnes with Appalachian Voices. They are a co-host of the Virginia Solar Summit, and they plugged in last time. Chelsea wrote a great, she has written many great articles, but specifically wrote a great piece after the 2019 conference about this brownfields to brightfields track. Without further ado, Chelsea, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, my name is Chelsea Barnes. I'm our new economy program manager at Appalachian Voices. I'm based here in Wise County in the Coalfield region, and we do work with the Solar Work Group of Southwest Virginia, which is a citizens group here that has representation from local governments, economic development professionals, solar developers, anyone and everyone who wants to be involved. And we're entirely focused on helping to bring solar energy to the Coalfield region, both as a job opportunity and also as an economic boost for the region. We know that more and more companies are looking to be 100% solar powered, and so we want to make sure that our region is able to supply that when businesses are looking to relocate here. So that's our focus. That's about half my job is that solar work, and the other half of my job is looking at abandoned mine land reclamation and economic development projects. So this conference is like a dream come true for me. So thanks so much for the invitation, and I'm really happy to be here this morning.
No, thanks. We're grateful for your help. I'm glad I'm not the only one dreaming. Please pinch me.
Hey, Dan, sensitive to the delegates' time, I had a question in the chat, maybe that would be good for both delegates. I'll expand this to West Virginia. So one of the questions was around is Southwest Virginia too far away from the loads of energy demand? And I guess I'll add to that, the proximity to transmission lines in Southwest Virginia and Southern West Virginia, a deterrent that's going to keep us from realizing this dream of populating our previously mined lands with renewable energy projects?
That's a great question, Vince, and we've heard that before. But we have the big power plant for Dominion is located in St. Paul, Virginia, and we're able to get on the grid from there. And we would be, and this would be, I think it would be an easy fix for us to have loads moving from Southwest Virginia to other parts of Virginia and the country. I don't think that's an issue at all because of what investments we've made with the St. Paul site and other sites, Carbo over AEP site over in Southwest Virginia, which are already near those abandoned mine lands. So I don't think that's going to be a big issue. And I'm sure that in West Virginia, they have the same type of infrastructure that we have, that because when you had these old coal mines, you had a coal operations, you had a bunch of power going to them anyway already. So I think we're ready to roll in Southwest Virginia.
Yeah, let me, Dan, if I could kind of piggyback on that and address that as well. I totally agree with Delegate Kilgore. There's a lot of high voltage lines running through the area of Southwest Virginia. And I've looked at a lot of these reclaimed mine lands previously. I've talked to DMME about this, and hadn't really looked at them that closely because of a lot of the legal issues in acquiring site control on those properties. Doing title search, trying to figure out who owns the mining rights and whether or not they're going to transfer with the land. It wasn't low-hanging fruit, and so that's why we were primarily developing in other areas of the state. But now with this passage of this House Bill 1925 and the incentive that grant program provides, it kind of levels the playing field, I think, a lot with developing that land for solar. So I think you're going to see some more activity in that region.
Yeah, I think so too. I know Senator Manchin has a bill with some tax credits for potentially new sources of demand, in some of these locations. But Mr. Hansen, Delegate Hansen, what's your view from West Virginia?
I agree. There's power infrastructure that goes to a lot of these old mine sites, and you know, they didn't. So that shouldn't be a problem. I agree with the delegate from Virginia. And you know, that bill you just mentioned from Senator Manchin, that's his advanced energy manufacturing tax credits, and kind of reviving a program that hasn't been used in West Virginia, and directing a portion of those tax credits into communities that are hardest hit by the decline of the coal industry and loss of power plant jobs. So that would be a large part of West Virginia. And if we can get some of those manufacturing operations to site in these communities that really need to diversify their economies, you're right that that would create some additional electricity demand, and to the extent that they demand renewables, could provide greater incentive to build on these former mine sites.
Sure. Yeah, I'll even take some server centers out there, just beaming things up into satellites, maybe if it will suck a little juice. But Rachel, come in on policy and how you guys are seeing the very fast and rapid evolution of the policy landscape in Virginia and West Virginia.
Well, I'll always speak for Virginia. I cover Virginia, Maryland, and DC. But I have to say the Virginia Clean Economy Act and a lot of the other clean energy legislation that's been passed over the past couple of years, including House Bill 1925, are really setting a really important foundation for the Commonwealth, and is attracting lots of investment and interest from developers. I mean, even just in the past 6 months since the VCA was enacted, we've had a number of new members want to come into the space and express interest in joining the association. And I think that's a really good sign of how we're going to continue to see investment dollars flow into Virginia because of this policy, and some of the more recent bills that have passed. So it is really important that we have kind of our policies be a guiding light for where we want to go, and the VCA and House Bill 1925, those are beacons for us, and can really drive a lot of renewable energy deployment. I think we'll see that continue to happen in the next couple of years and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chelsea, I mean, no one's really tracking the geography the way that you do. Can you just add, what's your view on HB 1925 in particular, certainly standing on top of the Clean Energy Act?
Sure. Well, HB 1925 was my baby. We worked to develop that bill language back in 2019 with just all sorts of constituents and solar energy developers and the utilities, just to make sure that that bill language was something that was going to work for everyone. And I think it's very clear that it's needed. That kind of policy is needed to help level the playing field, to help reduce pressure on farmlands and forest land. And also, just to speak to the equity piece, that's, there's the Appalachia, Southwest Virginia, these are the regions that have powered our nation for more than a century. And we have sacrificed so much, the people here have sacrificed so much to provide everyone in this country with cheap electricity. And now that we are shifting the way that we produce energy, we really owe it to these places to let them in on the growing opportunity of renewable energy development. So I think, it's a really good policy. Everyone agrees, it's needed. Now we just have to get it funded. And I think that's kind of the challenging piece, is that we have to, everyone agrees that this is something that will be good for our state and good for renewable energy development. But the hard piece comes next, and figuring out how we fund that. And I think that's a discussion that I'd love to see happen amongst our Virginia legislature. And I'm sure y'all in West Virginia will have that same discussion.
I guess I got a follow up to that. So you mentioned it's a great bill. I've been really excited to see it happen. I'm excited to see the governor sign it. However, it's unfunded unless there's federal dollars that come into it, which are not currently obligated. The Virginia Brownfields Assistance Fund was created. Everybody slapped hands, celebrated how great it was. And then it was a decade or so later before it was funded by the state General Assembly. So how, as policy advocates from any of this group, do we make this great idea a reality and get funding into it, and commitment from both state or federal side? What can we do from this point forward? And you're welcome to add to that, Chelsea, but any ideas, but anybody on the panel really?
Yeah, I mean, I can start since that's been what we've been working on. I think there's a lot of interest at the federal level in funding programs like this. EPA, NREL, lots of the state agencies are thinking about this because it is a real challenge. Not just in Virginia. It's a challenge across the country that we're already seeing localities here pushing back against solar energy development because they're concerned about land use, they're concerned about farms, and they're concerned about forest land. So I think it's something we have to address head on and think about how we're going to move more solar energy development onto brownfields and onto rooftops, and so that we're reducing pressure on localities. So I think there is a we'll continue to engage. I wish Delegate Kilgore was still here with us. I know he had a busy morning, but I know he's been talking to federal officials. So, and I think with the expected infrastructure package that will be coming down from the through Congress, I think we'll see some opportunities there. At the state level, I think it's just a conversation we need to start having with our legislatures to figure out how to pay for it. I think there's everyone agrees that it needs to be done. It's just a matter of thinking through how we're going to fund it, whether that's through some sort of tax or whether it's appropriations or whether it's something that's on utility bills. We'll just have to figure that out.
I mean, if I could jump in really quick, Dan. So one of the things I've talked to DMME about, and also DEQ, I mean, not to say that the grant funding is not important, it certainly is, and it would definitely open up a lot of that land, I think, to developers, and they would see the merit there. And I haven't, to be honest, I haven't looked at the latest DEQ permit by rule regs that just came out to see what they're doing, but to allow brownfield development to be as an exception from the DEQ PBR process, to be permit by right if you're developing in a brownfield from the state perspective, and also localities, the ability for localities to create permit by right areas in their localities as well. That would just open up a lot of this land so developers know that they can develop that land and that there's no risk involved. So that in conjunction with a funded grant would really spur things, but in the absence of that grant funding, I think those measures would go a long way as well.
And I'll jump in really quick as a preview for some of our later content in our permitting session later on in the event. Beth Major will be talking about that permit by rule changes. There's always been an exemption that was just not quite understood in there for brownfields if you don't disturb additional lands. The new PBR regulations will clarify that and expand on that. Right. So if you're not going to disturb a lot of new land, then you would only have to notify Virginia, DEQ, instead of going through the permit by rule full process. So stay tuned, learn more about that as we go through the event.
Sure. Yeah, I sat on the PBR RAP group, and yeah, we talked about it, and I mentioned, yeah, you're absolutely right. It should be in there now.
Yeah, thank you. Great stuff, and I appreciate that tease. Yeah, we have a whole session on permitting, and it's followed immediately by our daily Q&A wrap, the expert session, where each day we have a different bank of experts. Although I think Vince is going to roll through each one each day. We're going to pick on his big brain, where you can get all your questions answered. We'll really be able to chew on this tactical detail because, again, now with so much policy on the books and in the pipeline in Virginia, it's down to tactical implementation and administration. How will DMME implement these rules, which hopefully, just to come back about funding, let's pray for, Infrastructure Week's true success this time around. One of these weeks here, we'll finally get something. And it's really small dollars here. This type of front end pre-project work, like the EPA Brownfield program, that's how they get this tremendous 20-to-1 leverage, where early on, just in assessing these sites, some small dollars can really help open up the possibilities of a project coming to fruition. And so it won't take much to give the front end the boost that it needs to overcome the extra obstacles lingering from these legacy issues. The little schmutz in the back a little this and that, but with some insurance and some other things, we can make these projects go. But speaking to that, Mr. Hansen, can you talk a little bit about that brownfield to brightfield bridge, or dwell a little bit on brownfields specifically, and maybe what it means? Because a lot of our folks are hearing about this for the first time, and it's a scary, scary word, and they don't know what it means. It is like a box of chocolates. You kind of never know what you're going to get on a brownfield until you buy it in. But you've done so much of that work, and I look forward to what you have to say.
Well, brownfields are sites that either have some type of pollution or some perceived environmental threat that may or may not be real. And so the challenge or the opportunity with brownfields is to do some work up front to characterize the site and determine whether or not there is something there that needs to be addressed, and then to address it in order to make it available for further development like solar or something else. And so there's a process in place, like you mentioned, EPA brownfields process with assessment grants and cleanup grants. And, that's a process that's had bipartisan support and done a lot of good things all across the country. I did want to mention, though, that last session in the West Virginia legislature, we passed 2 solar bills that impacted the development of brownfields for solar. The first was what we call the utility solar bill, and it allows each of the 2 major utilities in West Virginia to develop utility scale solar, a total of 400 megawatts. But that development needs to be placed on a brownfield or other type of degraded land, including a coal mine or some other type of degraded land. And the first of our 2 utilities almost immediately put out a request for proposals from solar developers, and they're going to be moving forward, as far as I know, soon on their first 50 or 100 megawatts of that. That's Appalachian Power. And then the second utility, First Energy, has committed to moving forward through that process in 2021. So even though it didn't require them to do so, they're both moving now that they have the enabling legislation. The other bill we passed last session corrected what was a punitive tax on large solar arrays, so that they're only taxed based on their capacity, accounting for their capacity factor, not 100% of their capacity, but just a fraction of that. And that's made it made solar more accessible to non-utility solar developers. And there's 2 large projects that have already gone through the process: a 90 megawatt site in Beckley, in the heart of coal country, and then a 100 megawatt site that's in Berkeley County along the Potomac River on a brownfield site. So even though that correction of the tax wasn't specifically focused on brownfield sites, it allowed developers to move forward in West Virginia, and some of those projects are being targeted toward brownfields because those sites just make sense. A lot of them are already flat, for one thing, close to electrical infrastructure, and ready to be redeveloped.
Absolutely. Rachel, I see you shaking your head. How do you see that as more of a traditional solar person? You're stepping, into land use, from a different perspective. How do you see it?
I think Chelsea highlighted this earlier, the fact that we are seeing a lot of opposition right now from different community organizations or localities just in general for utility scale solar projects coming into their communities. And Chessa and other stakeholders have done a lot of work recently to ensure that we've got as many tools in the toolbox to help localities realize greater revenue streams from solar projects, so that our localities truly are benefiting from these projects. But I think we're still going to see that tension play out over the next couple of years. And as we are ramping up our solar deployment in Virginia to meet the needs to meet the requirements of the VCEA, I think that's really going to come to a head. And developing on brownfields and former mine sites, I think, can help to reduce that tension and field solar projects into those areas. As the delegate from West Virginia said, brownfield sites, they are prime sites. If they're, already ready to be redeveloped, a lot of them are flat. That's really what you need for a good solar project.
Thanks, yeah, and I'll tease another terrific session later in the program on day 3. That's March 18th at 10 a.m. We have Mr. Jonathan Sweet from Pulaski County, Virginia, who's going to be talking about their giant, greenfield project and how they work their way through some community opposition. And that's really where I wanted to go. We can, pivot slightly because it is, one of the most important kind of bullet points under brownfields to brightfields is it doesn't really face the greenfield opposition problem. These are stranded sites. They're often eyesores. And as we go to scale, if we're really going to build all these megawatts, there's going to be a lot more people seeing a lot more solar panels in a lot more places. And, we have to involve them by law. So, Chelsea, if I can pick on you, how are you thinking about community opposition going forward as we really start taking solar up to a scale that I think that most people really don't have a picture in their mind of where we are about to go with the growth?
Yeah, so in Southwest Virginia, where I do most of my work in communities, we haven't really experienced much of that problem because folks here, like you said, we've got eyesores all around us. We have the scars of the coal field region, of the coal industry all around us. And I think that there's just a mentality here that, that it's not so much of a sacrifice to see energy production on your land. It's something that people here have been proud of for a very long time, is that they're an energy producing region. So I don't think we see that same kind of pushback here in the coalfield region specifically, just because, people are either there's land to clean up and doesn't solar look better than what's there right now, or they're just, of the mentality, well, that it's going to bring in jobs and it's going, and it's going to continue our energy producing heritage. So why would we oppose it? But thinking more broadly than just our little corner here, I think that one of the things that we just need to be doing is helping communities, as Rachel kind of talked about a little bit, and realizing as much of the benefits as possible. And I think that's something that our DMME has done a great job of doing, is helping to work with localities to help them understand how they can maximize tax revenue, how they can work to get the most benefits out of the project as possible. Something we try to do here is insert things like local hiring requirements, so that we're employing people locally to build the projects, or otherwise somehow benefit from the project. And I think that's something that more localities will probably be looking to, and maybe John might be able to speak to that more from his experience on Shine, and how we're making sure that the localities where this development is happening are benefiting from the job opportunities as well.
And I would like to, if I could, yeah.
Yeah.
The Shine is utility scale workforce development initiative. There's a number of developers that have pulled together, and we've built an outdoor lab at Southside Community College, and we built 2 additional mobile labs that we can deploy 2 areas in Southwest Virginia to developers and EPCs, contractors that are developing projects or constructing projects in that area. Right now, we're just seeing, I think, 65 to 70% of the workforce that's constructing these projects in Virginia is coming from out of state, and we need to deal with that, especially when we're developing in Southwest Virginia. We want to make sure those jobs stay there. So we're trying to work with local community colleges to train up local individuals to work these projects to the greatest extent possible. So we've had some hard times working through the COVID pandemic and doing these and providing this training. We're hoping that we'll start to loosen up right now. I know we're starting our first mobile training program at Central Virginia Community College, I think later on this month. So we hope to expand from there with additional mobile labs.
Thank you, John. That's great. And before Rachel, you can jump in, I'll just tease quickly. We do have a solar job session almost 24 hours from right now, tomorrow, 9:45 a.m. Because it is a a key issue. And if you're watching out there, if you're a young person thinking about what you want to do with your life, I just want to say one word to you right now, one word: solar. Rachel, please go ahead, jump in.
I love it. Yeah, I just wanted to tag team off of what John was saying. Shine actually just received state allocated dollars in the most recent budget, and it's really exciting because that is going to provide Shine the opportunity to deploy an additional mobile lab and also fund a new full-time position for the program. So the program is growing, and really the goal for the next couple of years is to scale it up dramatically so that we can deploy a couple different mobile labs all over the state, and we're really able to get people through the program quickly. Right now, the program is a 10-day program, and we're exploring cutting that down to 3 to 5 days. And so we're really trying to do everything we can to get this program off the ground and make sure that folks have access to these jobs, and that Virginia is capturing the direct wage benefits and the job creation that is a result of our policies.
Thanks. Yeah, it's so important to stress. I just don't think that the message is getting out there. It's a boom, and we have a people bottleneck. There's just no doubt about it, and it's not going away. This work is just going to continue to swell. And I kind of want to come back to Chelsea a little bit. I know you're not experiencing kind of the regular community opposition, but in this energy transition, do you still see reticence to solar in general? Maybe not landowners who don't mind now putting solar panels on their old brownfields, but even just regular folks out there looking for jobs. Is the message getting out there in Southwest Virginia, but also in West Virginia, that, hey, we can leave our old energy legacy behind, but step right into this Jetsons future?
Yeah, I'd love to hear Delegate Hansen and, again, Delegate Kilgore would have been able to speak to this really well, but I'll try to do my best to represent the views of folks here. I think that there's still some folks out there that are think that solar is the reason that coal has gone away, which we know is not the immediate reason for coal declining. Obviously, clearly. It's been declining for decades before solar ever really took off. So I think that, I still think there's a little bit of that from some populations, but I think for the most part, our leadership has really stepped up and realizing that this is the way of the future. And I hear state legislators here, I hear local leaders here, local government officials here saying all the time that we need to show people from outside this region that we are part of the future. We are, part of the new energy revolution, that we are not still living in the Stone Age, that we can be a solar producer. I think, and it's just something that folks recognize as part of the reality of the future. And I think, would love to hear Delegate Hansen's thoughts on this as well. But I think you're still going to see a little bit of that mentality of the anti-solar.
Yeah, Chelsea, as a card-carrying Southwest Virginian who now lives in Richmond, I've seen a tremendous change in my lifetime on the attitude towards renewable energy in Virginia. I've seen coal communities become Soul Smart. You're going to learn more about the Soul Smart program. We have 3 counties that are now Soul Smart and that are coal producing counties. I guess I would like to ask Delegate Hansen, are you seeing that kind of change in West Virginia on attitudes as well as like we've seen in Southwest Virginia?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and it's kind of a touchy question. It's still sometimes hard to talk about because I do try to talk about this issue a lot, and people take it the wrong way. People think you're either for or against something, even though there's really a gray area. So I think the thing to recognize in West Virginia is that the coal industry, despite all its troubles, is going to be around for a while, and we're still going to have coal-fired power plants in West Virginia for a while. Now, there's going to be fewer jobs than there were in the past, but there are still going to be many jobs, and those jobs are really important, not just to the people who have them, but their families and their communities, and then they generate a lot of tax dollars. So this is important. But that being said, there are so many opportunities with new energy jobs that we need to make sure we attract as many of those as possible. but there's still resistance. So for example, I mentioned after we passed a bill last session that dealt with that punitive tax, one of the proposed solar developments that came right after that was outside of Beckley in Raleigh County, which is, a coal county historically. And they needed to negotiate a payment in lieu of taxes, or a pilot agreement with the county commission. And that was a very contentious negotiation, because people in the community did not want to sanction any development that might cause less coal to be mined and burned. I mean, it really came down to that, even if there was not going to be a direct connection between that solar array and any particular coal mine in Raleigh County. Now, ultimately, they agreed to a pilot agreement. And it was kind of interesting because the labor unions were publicly supporting this solar project. The local Chamber of Commerce was publicly supporting it. And to me, that's a real indication of how things are gradually shifting here. If you have the unions that have typically, supported the mine workers, because the mine workers have been such a powerful union in West Virginia, if you have them supporting a solar development and the chamber, we're on the cusp of a real change here. But I think the change in West Virginia, unlike in Virginia, where the legislature is taking these big, bold steps to transform their energy economy, that's not what you're going to see in West Virginia. In West Virginia, you're going to see smaller, bite-sized bills that have real impact, but then it's going to be sort of an iterative process where we see the benefits of those first bills, and the unions are on board, and you get a few hundred workers here and a few hundred workers there, and you start pumping money into the county budgets and the local school systems from these solar developments, and people start to understand that this is real. It's not just this fantasy that Delegate Hansen is talking about in other states, but it's something real in West Virginia, and will be more of a constituency to build on those successes and to go even further. So I think it's going to be a gradual process, but I think we're in it now, and we're starting to see the benefits already.
Thank you, Evan. That's great.
Before the pandemic, we took the Virginia, what we were doing in Virginia, to the West Virginia Brownfields Conference and presented. And, I thought it would be lukewarm, reception, and that room was packed for that session. So there was a really strong interest in talking about reuse of mine lands for renewable energy in that group, which gave me hope that West Virginia was going to really think through theirs, and maybe taking it in small pieces may be beneficial to do it right. So I wouldn't look at it as a negative.
No, I think it is beneficial, because also if you talk to a lot of legislators, there is a recognition that we're in the midst of a transition, and managing that transition is one of the more important things that we're doing right now. But, if you think about where we are today and where we want to be 10 years from now, we may actually get further over 10 years if we take incremental steps and bring people with us, rather than try to do something big and just stall and fail. So that's where I am with it right now.
Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate those comments, and I tend to agree. And I feel like we're really, when I mentioned the end of the beginning at the top, and I feel that because we're kind of past the peak and we're rolling down the hill now. As these projects become more economically viable, and as we find ways to make them more environmentally productive at the same time for bees and butterflies and other things, people should be getting on board. And I just want to, before I throw it to John, actually, to weigh in on his perspective, kind of at the project level and in the private sector, I want to come back, on this debate about the death of coal and has renewables killed coal? No, it was fracking. We had the biggest carbon boom of all time in a shocking 8-9 years of drilling that began kind of right in the teeth of the last recession. And I was involved in some of that work. We were switching out coal-fired power plants for more efficient natural gas plants. So it was a bridge fuel. It was the biggest carbon boom of all time, but maybe the shortest with the way that prices are plummeting for solar and wind and now batteries. Tremendous transition, a renaissance, as we say. But John, you're actually out there making it real and doing the work, a square foot at a time. How are you, approaching this renaissance, especially as you're, engaging these communities?
Good question, Dan. I think this is a good transition from talking about brownfield development to greenfield development, because right now that's primarily what's happening in Virginia. We definitely want to be able to develop the brownfield areas that we're talking about in the coal region. But right now, the low-hanging fruit that's been developed since 2015, when we had the initial legislation passed, putting 500 megawatts in the public interest, it's all been greenfield development for the most part. I think a couple projects may have been brownfield, but and that's where developers have been focusing, looking at timberland that's been on timberland and farmland that's been located adjacent to 115 and 230 kV lines, with landowners that own hundreds of acres. And that's really where you have to focus as a developer, as it being the low-hanging fruit. Those sites are starting to go away, and we're having to be more creative in putting together multiple landowners. We're working on our project right now where there's going to be likely over 50 landowners involved. With that being said, we want to make sure we're removing roadblocks to that development, and we're also not putting additional roadblocks in place. And the developers have been developing a lot of these projects for 3 or 4 years. And with the new PBR regs coming out, and with potential legislation, we want to make sure that those developers are not penalized for being the first implementers, the people out there leading a charge, trying to develop projects to meet these goals, not from the 2015 legislation, but from the Clean Economy Act, which is now requiring 16 gigawatts of renewable energy to be put on the grid. So I think we need to be conscious of that, but still be sensitive to the development and the economic and ecological impact that we're creating. But it is a balancing act there. So that's my perspective on it. I'm sure Chelsea has a perspective on it as well, and we respect the perspective of that community. But we need to be sensitive to the developers and the money they put in place these last 3 or 4 years.
Thanks, John. Yeah, Rachel, do you want to jump in? How do you react to what you've heard so far from our other presenters on the very sometimes tricky path of community redevelopment?
Yeah, I think John had it right. And some of the comments Chelsea said previously as well. I mean, we're developers, the developer community, we need to come to the table as partners, and we're very committed to coming to the table as partners with our landowners, with our localities. And I think it is going to be a little bit of a trust building exercise in the first couple of years as we're really scaling up development in Virginia. And it's going to be an important couple of years for the future of solar development in general. So I think, just given the different stakeholders that are involved, it is going to be a practice of, how can we partner together and not be adversarial and really come out with win-wins.
Thanks. Yeah, I love a lot of what I'm seeing from developers really across the nation. I have more of a kind of a national, international view, and we've learned a lot of lessons from brownfield development where there's a purposeful effort made always programmatically from EPA on involving communities up front in the planning process, engaging environmental justice issues and other things kind of at the top. So we're not starting from scratch. And I've seen, really amenable solar developers, very amenable to community input. Sometimes a community walkway along the side, artfully landscaped along the side of a solar field is beautiful and is an added community amenity that can go a long way into getting buy-in. So there's all kinds of tactical things, and if we can be open to it, we can really maximize the opportunity that Dominion started us off talking about today, and I think we've all kind of been circling around. how often do you get one? I didn't think I'd see another land boom in my lifetime, but here we go. And if we do it right, everyone can win, including Mother Earth. So I'm super excited. Who can save me from my excitement?
So let me just jump in really quick, Dan. I agree with the community involvement. So what we do and what a lot of the other developers in Virginia do, some of them don't, but we approach the county very early on. As soon as we have some sort of interest in an area or site control, we're talking to the county about what we need to do as far as setbacks and buffers and other concessions or conditions we would need to include in our permit with county, so that while we work through the process of site control and due diligence and desktop analysis, we're not we're taking their concerns into our development process very early. So when we come to the county with our permit application, they know what's going to be in there. We know what the county wants. So I think as developers, we have responsibility to be to approach the county very early and have that back and forth with localities.
Yeah, Dan, I'll note that, you mentioned it, but brownfielders across the country in Virginia, one thing we do good is community engagement, and it's built into the process. So a lot of you came here for a solar conference, but you're also getting a brownfield conference, and there's multiple sessions, including one today with EPA and DEQ, where you'll see a little bit about the brownfield process. I think even if you're not working on a brownfield, there's fundamentals in our program that apply to greenfield development. So I think, stay tuned for those sessions, even if solar is your gig, because I think you're going to learn a lot and see a lot of cool things. And there's a lot of tools that can help you on sites that are brownfields, which surprisingly, a lot underestimate what is a brownfield, and you're going to learn a little bit about that today. More sites are brownfields than people probably realize.
Yep. Land is like a box of chocolates. After 400 years of industrial revolution, we buried a lot of tanks in a lot of surprising places, and you never know. But that's why we do our diligence, environmental assessments and all these kinds of things. I mean, the professionals, that's the really good news, and why I feel so confident and so excited that the Renaissance is ready to scale, because we have all the tools. We got some make some adjustments, adapt some things for solar projects, but we're standing on the shoulders of some great folks who have blazed the trail before, like personal heroes of mine, like Charlie Barch, who's a name everyone should know. There should be a bus somewhere for folks like this in Washington. Just the quiet nerds diligently working away on the future. And I should also mention that I kind of want to transition to pollinators, or we don't have to transition, but it is one of our two featured topics here at the Virginia Solar Summit this year, mine lands being the other. It's all redevelopment, but we can think about pollinator restoration, pollinator habitat as a kind of greenfield development. And we're kind of stacking sustainability, right on top. That provides, not just highly functional habitat, beautiful aesthetics, but ecosystem services, because our bees are literally dying. So does anyone want to jump in on kind of this bigger conversation of, sustainability, what it means right now, maybe even in the context of, we've got a national infrastructure conversation, we've got grids failing in Texas, and climate change seems to be battering us around a little bit more, but then here we are, my friends, sitting in this space that's ready to scale with, a little bit of value to kind of hit each of these problems. Is anyone else feeling the serendipity? Or just smiling?
I guess, John, are you looking at pollinator projects in your buffer zones? Like, how are you guys approaching that subject? I know Virginia is really promoting it. Through our programs you'll hear more about, but I know you've been involved too in some of those discussions.
Right, I know the PBR, the new regs, I think they may incorporate the pollinator scorecard as that we have to fill out the pollinator scorecard. I don't know if there's going to be anything mandatory, any score to meet. They just came out and I haven't had a chance to review them yet, but I'll go back to what I said previously. Look, we're all for incorporating the pollinator habitats into our project. The problem that I see is mandatory requirements being placed on developers that have been developing towards mandatory requirements that were already in place. And I think up to that point, it needs to be voluntary or a condition with the locality that they require the developer to put in place. It's a very competitive market out there, and we have to be aware of that. So yes, I'm all for incorporating pollinator habitats into projects, but we have to be careful about how we do it, and the mandatory requirements we put in place, and make sure we're not creating a situation that does not allow us to meet the demands of the Virginia Clean Economy Act. And I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, at this point, it's designed really to get you the gold star, but not be a mandatory requirement. You know, I think that's kind of the idea. Promote it, but not require it as a mandatory requirement.
Well, that's a good point. And one of the things that could create an incentive for us to do that is if the purchasers of this energy, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Microsofts, if they wanted us to meet a certain scorecard for the pollinator habitats, that would be an incentive for us to do that. I don't think any of them have come out and said that they would do that yet, but if they did, then that could change that market.
Good point. In Virginia, we've seen a lot of the customer base, these large corporations really driving the renewable energy market, and they could drive the pollinator demand around these sites as well.
Thank you, Chelsea. I saw you trying to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I agree about the requirements thing. It's like asking solar developers to solve a problem that they didn't cause, and it's kind of it would be unfair to require that in some sort of policy mechanism that would ultimately put the costs on developments. But I do think things like voluntary, if the company, if the Amazon, whatever, they want to pay a little bit more to make sure that those standards are met, then that levels the playing field for the developers when they're competing for a project. Or if there are ways that DEQ or other folks can help provide the the funding to help develop those the pollinator sites. I think from our perspective in working on brownfield redevelopment and coal mine land redevelopment, we're just really excited for the opportunity for soil remediation, environmental remediation to be built into these projects, because we've just seen that so many of the sites that we're working on are no longer able to support vegetation, really, or good vegetation. We can get a lot of invasives going, but not good pollinator habitat. So I think for us, it's a really exciting opportunity to see solar panels go in that are also at this, where at the same time you're doing some soil remediation, some habitat rebuilding, so that 20, 30 years down the line, when the panels come out of the ground, that site is usable for other purposes or can just return to a natural habitat. So I'm really excited and would love to see more ways that we can help to incentivize, promote that kind of co-usage of sites.
Thanks. Are there any policies or even local policies? How can we help address these kind of extra layers, either on the downside risk or the upside, going for pollinators, going for maybe amenity? We've gotten a lot of action at the state level in Virginia. We may get at least some of the cash money that we need from Washington. But I'm curious, we haven't really dove down to the local level yet. How can communities maybe be proactive? John, Rachel, jump in. John, what do you need? How can the community, front load their wants and desires into a project that makes it easier for you to meet them where they are?
Sure. Well, if a locality, a county, or a town wants to have solar developed in their locality, if they create certain zones that are permit by right for solar, yeah, I'm going there. One of the main risks that we have in a project is getting through the local permitting process. If you remove that risk, that creates much more value in developing it in that area. That's one way. I mean, I think obviously locality is not going to provide you with any financial incentive. I don't think that's going to happen. So really, it's removing the roadblock in the county, and that's the permitting process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, not a named feature issue, but permitting, we've got, a couple sessions dialed in, and we're really going to chew on that. And even our day 3 keynote will be delivered by Ms. Robin Ernst. She's really going to dig into pollinators and permitting. She's on the front line. She's already taking on this work and already discovering, some of the boundaries of the space and maybe some bottlenecks. It's definitely an area that we need to highlight as an industry and figure out how we can more smoothly scale into our solar renaissance here without getting tripped up by, some of the very, very practical realities of real estate development, which by law and by right should include the local folks. It's their land. We're all in this together. And on some of these properties that are in programs like brownfields, Vince mentioned, engaging the community is kind of involved. But on Superfund, it's even in the law. Thou shalt involve the community, and so and we can learn a lot of lessons from that and seize this opportunity. Chelsea, were you trying to jump in? No. John. Okay, well, I'm sensitive to the time. We got about 5 minutes left, so I kind of want to turn and just kind of wrap it up. It's been a great conversation. I feel like we could go on. We haven't barely scratched the surface, but at least we've said a lot of things on the table. And I kind of want to go around. Vince, what if I'll pick on you first. You've been in listen mode most of the time. Give us just a minute or so on your reactions to what you've seen.
I think it's a great discussion. I see more and more stakeholders getting engaged around this topic. I think Virginia has a wonderful opportunity to design this renaissance, as you say. I say solar revolution here, and do it different than maybe some other state that saw all the development go to green fields and green space development. I do wish Delegate Kilgore had been here. So all of you that were itching to ask him questions, we'll make sure he gets your comments and questions so he can be thinking about that next session. But and people like Chelsea are not afraid to remind these policymakers about some of those topics too. So your voices will be heard. I think we were at the tip of the iceberg in 19. We're in the early in the game now. I think 2 years from now it's going to be really something amazing in Virginia. So I'm excited. It's going to be challenges, to making this happen right. And that's why we're having this, to bring those challenges forward. So don't be afraid to ask hard questions. Don't be afraid to make comments that may be unpopular opinions. But yeah, this is great.
Yeah, this is a nuts and bolts event for nerds. Who can I pick on next, or who wants to dive in? Final thoughts? See John reaching for his mouse. Go, John.
Yes, I mean, Chelsea, you can chime in here too. I thought it would be a good time just kind of do a quick recap of what we were able to accomplish in the past General Assembly session in Virginia. I think in general, we were able to deal with a lot of the local tax issues, M&T taxes, revenue share in lieu of that, incorporate energy storage into that, and create an escalator to the revenue share. And I don't know if people don't know what I'm talking about, there is an opportunity for localities to opt into a revenue share in lieu of M&T taxes for certain size solar facilities. I think it's between 25 and 150. Is that right, Rachel? 25 and 150 megawatts. And then incorporating a lot of energy storage into permitting processes at the local level and the state level. That's been done. And then obviously the brownfield development grants. And what else, Rachel? Am I missing something? I'm sure I am.
Yeah, we were able to expand the PBR program to standalone storage and hybrid project solar plus storage, which is a really a transformative piece of legislation.
So in all, it was a very successful General Assembly session. I think we were able to get all of our asks for pretty much all of our bills that we had out there at the session, which is a first in my experience in the industry. So
yeah, so I think we're kind of wrapping up here, Dan, toward the end.
Yeah, I wanted to give
Little
Chelsea.
preview maybe of our next, speaker. Folks should come back at 10:30 because you're going to have 15 minutes or so from Carrie Hearn at DMME. Who's going to kind of keep expanding on Virginia policy, what DMME is doing, the Soul Smart program that DMME is helping localities get ready for this to make sure that they benefit from solar and not just have, are harmed by solar, and some of that equity discussion. So this is going to be a great lead in to that discussion and the rest of what's an action-packed day.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Carrie's remarks. She was on our planning committee, and she's new in her role and very focused on equity. I look forward to that. The big Virginia Brightfield boot up, I like to say, but I like my puns and my alliterations. Yeah, Chelsea, did you have a final thought, or did you already? Yeah.
I think the thing that kind of stuck with me as we were talking through all this is that, there's a lot that we can do to legislate and help support this kind of development and fund this kind of development of solar energy on brownfields. But, I think John kind of hit on something that I think is really important, is that there's a lot of community and locality education that needs to happen, and that's not really something that you can legislate. But the groups like what we've got going in the solar work group of Southwest Virginia, I'll just brag on us for a minute, I think has been so key in helping to prime localities to be ready for this. The Soul Smart program is a really great way to help localities navigate the solar industry and what it means for their community. And then the work that DMME is doing as well, and helping support localities as they are seeing more solar energy develop come in. I think there's so much of that kind of work that needs to be done, just community engagement. And I'm hoping that more and more communities are kind of following along and learning from the great resources that are available.
Thank you, Chelsea. That's perfect. I hope everybody's watching. I know we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds everywhere dialed in today. I hope you've all been taking notes. Of course, we'll send you all the takeaways afterwards, and you'll be able to rewatch this. Again, I hope all of our states are plugged in, because what's happening in Virginia is very special. I've been paying attention to this space for a long time, and as we've said already, it does feel kind of like a dream, but really just to get to this opportunity. We still have to make it real, and we still have to do the work. It's going to take a whole generation. But there's, as I said, 400 years of industrial revolution to clean up after. So a lot of work to do. I want to thank all of our panelists. I'm going to brag on you all. Everybody should look you up afterwards and the important work that you're doing. And John, I want to thank you for your leadership from the private sector. You're a guy who, you get it. And the opportunity, as Vince said, there's green and green now. It's really win-win. And I look forward to seeing it come to life as we dive into the meat of our program following a short break. And so that's what we're going to do right now, because it's a virtual 3-day solar slog and you're all zoomed out. We really want to encourage you to stand up, take a break, go get a drink of water. If it's sunny where you are, get a face full of sunshine, but come back for our next session, which is at the bottom of the hour. As Vince said, Ms. Carrie Hearn from DMME with some focused remarks on her perspective on her new role, building a brighter Virginia for all, and getting right to this inclusive development moment, or possibility for inclusive development. And then we're gonna come right back with our first pollinator session. So bees and butterflies on the Brightfields. It's really a dream. And unicorns and pixie dust too. Holy cow, hang tight. But no, it's very real, and we're going to get to a lot of the problems today too. This is hard work, and we've got some of the most sophisticated professionals in the world taking on these most challenging sites, even Superfund. So hang on to your hats, stay tuned, take a break. We'll be coming back very shortly at the bottom of the hour with Ms. Carrie Hearn from DMME. Thank you. Thank you again to our panelists. Yeah, great job, you guys.
Thanks,
The
Dan.
future is bright.
Well,
And I do want to apologize. We forgot to mention a housekeeping note. Mr. Chris Bast was unable to join us at the last minute there. I want to thank him for organizing that terrific policy session. And I want to thank you all for being patient with me as I jumped in as moderator. So thank you for your patience. Back in a jiff, folks. Take a break, stand up, stretch.